He bet big on BuzzFeed News and built one of the defining newsrooms of the social media era until that whole model collapsed.
Only to plummet to trade lower by about 8%.
Now he's making a new wager, small, premium, and direct to your inbox. As co-founder and editor-in-chief of Semafor, Ben Smith is betting that newsletters and live events beat chasing viral traffic. And, well, I sure hope so. So subscribe to Newcomer Substack, stay tuned for the Cerebral Valley Summit live in London. This is the Newcomer Podcast. This collision of the Trump administration and Anthropic, what is, this sort of DC view of Anthropic and the AI world's collision with the Trump administration?
A, what an incredible, insane story. B, I think just to pull it back, I think in the biggest picture, maybe the biggest story of the United States right now, and I think it's one that really begins in the Biden administration, is the very, very intense involvement of the United States government in the private sector. It's just, the CEOs of big American companies, big global companies would never go to Washington in the 1990s and the 2000s because you didn't have any customers there and you didn't want to be on regulators' radar. And now, and starting, in part with the kind of return of industrial policy, with the IRA and other Biden initiatives, there's suddenly a sense of wow, the U.S. government can pour money into my business if I, do some combination of making a good case and kissing the right asses and donating to the right politicians.
In my mind, the biggest move the Biden administration did here was failing to have Elon Musk come when they're hyping up the electric auto industry. So, do you agree with that? It looms large in that they were trying to showcase some American companies, but the biggest effect was getting Elon very angry that he wasn't part of that showcase.
Yeah, but in some sense, that is like a butterfly that flaps its wings. But it's also, if you just sort of step back and look at it objectively, a marker of how totally political. Shocker, Washington is very political. But, Biden did not say, we want the most ambitious and forward-looking and successful American audio companies. He said, we want the ones that are aligned with my political coalition, which is to say the UAW. And so, that is how politics in fact works. Trump has obviously taken it to a totally different level and place, both in a philosophy is a strong word, a style of government that you kind of erases distinctions between public and private, and the government is taking stakes in companies in ways that are, I think some people believe, strategic, like Intel, the U.S. really ought to have a domestic chip manufacturing business, even if, as a senior government official said to me the other day, it is a garbage fire, because to hedge against the risk from China. There's obviously an argument.
The Intel situation, basically, the U.S. government gave them money, not contingent on equity, and then it was sort of we gave you all this money, now you should give us equity.
I think that there was a conversation that had begun around a grant, and the Trump administration said, no, we want equity. There's precedent for that. During the auto bailout, the Obama administration wound up getting paid back, and for investment for propping up the car makers. But the Trump administration has a different idea about it. They think they like the idea of having U.S. companies on the U.S. government's balance sheet, so the U.S. government can help them. They don't mind picking winners and losers. And then, of course, the Trump family is also in parallel monetizing the presidency and making lots of money, and their friends, across different industries find ways to make money off them. I think the Trump family doesn't mostly love their friends trading on the name. They like the Trump family businesses are doing amazing. Occasionally really close allies, they let the Ellison family put that UFC match on pay-per-view on Paramount Plus to drive some conversions, I guess, for them. So there's a sort of blending of public and private, and also an impulse that the U.S. government should be involved in deals. They're going to do a deal with Japan for $500 million in investment, and Howard Lutnick and Trump are going to, with the Japanese, pick where they're investing. That's the idea of that deal. A lot of it isn't quite happening, but there is just an involvement of the U.S. government in the private sector with no kind of philosophical overlay connected to the free market that we used to have.
And I want to get this back to sort of Anthropic and AI.
Sorry.
No, it's good. We needed to step back. But it's important to say, the Trump administration, with regard to sort of its handling of business, is the most corrupt administration in modern history? Or do you think there is an objective review that there's so much self-dealing? It feels very clear to me that there's just an insane level of corruption, whether it's, some of it's the plea bargain is probably the most objective, but
I mean, I think there's a million different things happening at the same time. Like the Trump family's crypto business is like totally unprecedented. Trump has personally gotten richer during the course of this 2-year term that I believe all other presidents come out. So like but then simultaneously there's just like a broad involvement of the U.S. government in business that, it sometimes like has the usual Washington corruption. Like you better hire. I saw a guy who used to work for Trump saying, you better hire a lobbyist who's connected to the administration, which is a very, very crude thing to say. That is how Washington has always worked. And then I think Anthropic kind of happens in that context. And then there's a total politicization of government. Trump uses government, views government, believes that he was persecuted by his enemies. By the way, like, I think if you look at some of those prosecutions, not a crazy thing to say. And that he is playing, and he said he wants to use the government to take revenge against his enemies, is directing the Justice Department. This actually, to me, above corruption, is the most novel and disturbing thing in the administration, is the use of the Justice Department as a tool to attack his enemies. And then in Anthropic kind of walks into that vortex where the government is totally improvisational across the boards, like improvisational on all sorts of fronts. You saw this with the war in Iran most of all, and the improvisations that are, where Trump had these balls in the air, but now we're almost 2 years in, and he's running out of space to keep improvising. But totally improvisational, very interested in rewarding their perceived friends and punishing their perceived enemies, and they've decided Anthropic is woke. And then would also like to see them hire lobbyists closer to the Trump administration and the Trump family.
Right. I mean, it feels like, do you agree that the core issue seems to be one of almost like aesthetics, where what Anthropic needs to do is, they sort of need to keep their head slightly lower than the Trump guys, sort of say, oh, yes, the government is in charge, not us. I think one of the issues that seems to be emerging is just, this isn't even Trump specific, but I think some people make the point that if you're a company saying we're going to have this like world historic power, governments, especially the U.S. government, is like, wait, we're supposed to be the world historic power and control things of that scale. And so they want this show that
that's I would say that is a reasonable point of view. Yes, that the governments have the monopoly on violence and stuff like that. That's not
the government. Well, first of all, I mean, I think DC brain loses sight of this. The first branch of our system is Congress, right? Congress is not doing the things you're talking about. A subset of our government that wants people like you, that people like you, not to see the Trump as representative of government instead of just a small or 1/3 of it.
Yes, I guess I would say I just think that I think just like talking to these people all the time, covering them a lot, I don't think there's like a single impulse at play here. I don't think there's like a clear strategy. I think the basic, one of the competing polls is we don't like these guys because they're woke. Another is we love these guys because it's a huge business. Look at these numbers. This is America. This is growth. Trump loves
Howard Lutnick is supposedly.
Yeah, but the core. The biggest, most important decision the Trump administration Trump made in his entire presidency, arguably, was during the transition. Everybody knows Trump loves deals. And so these CEOs come in and said, John Deere comes in and says, we're going to build a $5 million plant in Iowa, and Ford comes in and says, we're going to build a $50 million plant somewhere else. And OpenAI and Anthropic and Microsoft are just are adding zeros. And like Trump can count zeros.
Well, there's that, the Zuckerberg one where it's like, what number am I supposed to say?
Yeah, but the numbers are saying are real. And Trump says, whoa, like I do want to preside over an economic boom. Let's just clear everything out of the way of these guys. And I think that was a real decision that the administration made to just open the doors wide as they possibly could to these AI companies, including Anthropic, which and Amazon and their investment in Anthropic. So there's like, and that impulse is still there in the administration. Like they want giant companies to succeed and build lots of data centers. That's a real strain of the administration. Another strain, I think, is specifically Scott Bessent, who people in the White House think of as the smartest guy in the room, being really freaked out that
this is a guy who almost like punched Elon.
Almost punched Bill Pulte.
It's like he's the real reasonable one.
He's a very intense guy, and that he and I talked about this not in detail, but that he's worried that, he wakes up one morning and one of the big banks has been hacked in some novel way. Customers can't access their accounts, or institutions can't access their accounts, and the market's just and there's a sense of like a little hint that the financial system is fundamentally unstable, and that triggers just a massive, massive crisis. And I think, I think a lot of people who work in Silicon Valley don't think that's that big a risk, that's a little overstated, but he has, I think, when he saw Mythos come out, was really freaked out and got the banks really freaked out about this. And so so I would say like there is a impulse in the administration is just like, let these frontier models cook. There's another impulse in the administration and outside the administration that is, we got to regulate these things. They're really dangerous. And then it's fundamentally a personalist government where Donald Trump makes decisions in the black box of Donald Trump's head that come down on one side or the other of these competing
You have
things,
a
and
view
also
on
calculating
things
what Donald
personally
Trump wants
about
personally.
AI. Like, do you know how much they think AI? Like, I mean, he's excited about crypto, which I think of as sort of not that real. Do you think they see any difference between AI and crypto? They're like, it's another thing people are yelling about that sort of produces monies.
Yeah, people I know talk to Trump about AI. I think he kind of gets it in broad strokes, probably maybe the way I do. I mean, he's not a technical person, but he's not an idiot. I mean, I think he sees, like everybody else does, that that without this current Silicon Valley boom, the U.S. is like England. Like it's driving his whole economy, and
right. That's the saving grace for
the stock market, right? Like I'm sure right. Like he is. The Anthropic possible IPO is like not a trivial thing to him, and maybe he's holding it hostage and he's yelling at them, but it's not like but he also is, rooting for the stock market and for the growth numbers and for the jobs numbers. So there's a lot of different factors, and and there's some combination of, as you say, showing personal deference to Trump and telling him he's great and building a golden statue and hiring his favorite lobbyist.
The media feels like it's cheering for the savvy story type we talk about a lot, right? Like I think of Axios as sort of number one. Politico, does this type of story.
I don't know. I would say Ashley Gold at Axios is a great reporter. Well, breaking a lot of the news here. Ashley Gold at Axios.
But their style is, it's like blind quotes from the Trump administration, and it's. I feel like there's this implicit, like every company knows you need to sort of pat some ego, suck up to the administration, and it's written from the sort of sense that Anthropic is failing to do that. Whereas I think there's another lens, which is right now, every company in the United States is flattering the egos of the administration to get what they want. And we literally have one major tech company that's saying, we're not getting those aesthetics. Like, this is America. It's a democracy. This is a very important technology. We shouldn't have to flatter the ego of the president.
Is that what they're saying? I've not heard them say that.
I feel like that is we see it from the Dario memo that got leaked by the information in the Defense Department fight, which is that they clearly internally see Trump as this, anti-democratic force.
Yeah.
I don't think they're screaming that, but I think there's a limit given their clearly internal belief that they're going to then just be like supplicants publicly. And and that the media effectively sort of wants to push them into the supplication.
Yeah. And I don't think
you don't.
Yeah. No. I know exactly the style of article you mean. Like what? Like they just need to play the game, but I don't know. I guess I don't think the media should have a rooting interest particularly. But it is a complicated story, right? Like they have a very set.
The media should root for, democratic norms, not having sort of a imperial presidency. You don't think that?
Definitely democratic norms, and I'm not sure the power of the presidency one way. I mean, you have a very like a pre-Roosevelt version. Sounds great. But no, I think the media should mostly be focused on telling you what the hell is going on, which in this story is totally.
But frames rule the day. I mean, it just like
frames rule the net.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I mean, I think like you can spend too much time arguing about the framing of articles on Twitter. Ultimately, I think this is, again, I'm just go back to the war because I think that's the huge override of little story this moment. I know people are gonna there's gonna be all sorts of spin around. No, this was actually a great deal. The war was genius. People will say that. People will write that. It doesn't matter. Like, it was obviously not. It was a disaster.
Yeah,
it's not. And I think that's true most.
I just think the narratives matter so much. I mean, literally when we started this conversation, and I was talking, you're setting up sort of the corporate corruption. well, you did sort of start with, oh, it started during the Biden administration. Like,
That's true.
yeah, but sure, there are facts, but like you're marshaling facts to make a point. You know, it matters which
It does
facts
matter.
and issues first.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And like, and if it's a question of how much you want to cast Trump as a total aberration from American history or not.
Which you don't think he is, or
In some ways more than others.
what? Staying on the AI and DC topic, but switching gears
Yeah.
slightly. I mean, you know, what do you make of, I guess, the American public's animus towards AI? From, you know, the research that I've seen seems much worse in the United States. Certainly, developing countries are more excited about AI than developed.
Yeah.
And America in particular, where all this stuff is, you know, where we're making the money, are the most hostile to it. So I guess the American public broadly, and then how that's going to flow to the political parties. And like, are Democrats basically just going to be super opposed to AI?
Yeah, I mean, it is a wild story. As you say, in much of the world, they see it as kind of a cool technology they're eager to use and have their kids use to make more money. And here, the place where, as you say, we invented it and are making it, people are very, Americans are in a sour mood about everything, by the way. Like, they also think the economy is terrible, which is not really what the numbers say. So I think it is a moment where people are really angry about the way society is organized. They're angry about the pace of change. Both of those things, in terms of the wealth accumulated to the AI companies and just the strangeness of it, feels like it feeds that. I guess having covered the social media wars, and I remember writing a piece in 2017 saying like both political parties are coming for the tech companies, you know, and then watching for 10 years, nothing happen. I think that like you can overestimate. I think that Americans like technology more than you think, that they like products that they use, that there's a lot there. It becomes very hard to regulate anything that's anywhere within a million miles of politics and political speech. So, and that some of this stuff involve, you know, the companies behaved in ways that really no American company has ever behaved, which is like, our product is terrible and dangerous. It's going to put you out of work and poison your children's minds. And so like people believe that. And I think some of the companies are starting to behave more like normal companies, which is like, our technology is nice and useful and you will like it. And we're going to sponsor your little league team. So I guess I think it's going to normal.
Interesting.
I think that we're in a moment where a bunch of politicians like are going to come out and take these hardline anti-AI stands, that in a year the story will be a little more complicated.
Well, Gavin Newsom is clearly trying to be a little friendlier.
I think Newsom is actually probably is to me the one to watch. Like, he's a more, among the Democrats, a much more experienced and kind of seasoned politician who is really obviously running for president and thinking about where are things going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, not where are they right now. And then I do think there's also a real question of like, so far AI has really, really profoundly changed the lives of software engineers. And then I think for white collar people like me, it's been kind of neat. But like, and for kids, been like kind of helped them with their homework or made them lazy. But it's like a really marginal for everybody who isn't a software engineer. And I think I was talking to somebody at one of the frontier labs. Like, I think, you know, is it going to cure cancer or is it going to cause a massive catastrophe? Like, those two things are really going to shape people's views on AI. And they keep promising huge, particularly medical scientific breakthroughs. Maybe we get one of those that'll really change how people see it.
Yeah, I think I generally agree with the story you're telling.
I had an idea about animals. Like, they could maybe like pet health. But then they said like,
they extend our dogs.
it just seems like a place you could move faster, that with all the regulatory rules. But apparently the idea that a frontier lab would also operate like a dog research facility seemed, even for them, a little.
Well, Silicon Valley has there's this company, Loyal, that's working on dog life extension.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's not an AI company really, but it's premised on this idea that the CEO is very interested in life extension and you can move much quicker with dogs. Yeah. So there's a lot of work to be done. But so you are predicting that data centers will not become a top 5 issue in the sort of midterm.
I think people are going to talk. I think journalists love to write about it.
Right, people are spinning that up.
Such
like,
a fun
I don't know if
story.
you follow Charlotte Alter. You know, used to be a ton. Has a Substack that's you know, she calls it the new humanism. She's a little hostile to AI, and she had a Democratic operative on that he was sort of saying it's going to be, you know, and AI.
The thing is, we love
pastures
to talk about it so much.
Yeah.
If you poll people, like if you there, open-ended polling or what is the most important issue to you, the bucket of issues around government not working, corruption is like 30%. I think technology is less than 1% of like what are your actual top issues. If you ask people, do you want some weird humming warehouse in your backyard? They say no. But actually, interestingly, whether you live near a data center or not has no impact on what you say about data centers. It does not. Honestly, it feels to me like sort of a fake issue. The issue, I think, the kids stuff is different. I think, you talk to politicians, the issue that they feel that they can connect on most, that people are actually interested in their own lives, not as a 17th priority, if you ask me in the polls issue, but as I'm worried about this. It's kids. They feel like they failed that. And then social media, for various reasons, the U.S. never managed to regulate it. The Australians and the British now have. But I think you see like Spencer Cox in Utah, you see Josh Hawley, you see Jake Oppencloss in the House, a Democrat, starting to push regulations around kids and technology, kids and AI. That I think when J.D. Vance announced he's running for president, when people like that, I think there's going to be a really well-developed AI platform that's going to be probably softer on the companies in various ways than people are predicting now, everywhere except kids. And I think that's the place that they're going to want to make the companies squirm and push hard, and it's the place that voters feel much more viscerally and abstract.
Makes sense. I think most Americans, it's like where, kids can't make decisions for themselves. They deserve some government protection. I do see that resonant.
And there's some nightmare stories about kids hurting themselves after talking to chatbots. Very unusual, but unbelievably scary to me.
Yes.
In a way that data centers are I think are kind of a symbolic issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's reassuring. I think tech is getting, well, from the perspective of Silicon Valley, which, I share in many ways. I guess as someone who's sort of,
what do you think? Like,
I'm left leaning, right? But believe in technology and see a lot of this resentment online. People hate tech. They love tech products, right? And I agree with your sense that it's like, if the government like messed with Amazon tomorrow, people would lose their mind. So I largely agree. The one footnote to that is, right now, Anthropic gives you this warning, like, we don't have Fable anymore. And people are not like losing their minds over Fable the same way they would over like Uber not. Oh yeah.
He had gotten halfway through making his chem presentation on Fable and he has to redo it.
Because he doesn't have like the record and everything.
Or whatever. It was with teachers' permission.
So yeah, I'm just personally worried about a situation where Democrats just become super anti-tech.
Yeah, and there's no history of that working in American politics.
Right. And so it's just,
so I don't
AOC, do you think AOC is a top 3 Democratic contender for president right now?
Yeah, I think if she decides to run, she'll be incredibly formidable. And yeah, there will be a real anti-tech voice and a real and I think maybe it'll be nationalize the labs profits in some ways. Maybe it would either taking a stake in the companies or a really heavy tax on them, which by the way, I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley favor.
Right.
And it may be, the data center moratorium is theoretically until we get some kind of regulation on the books and it's sort of meant as leverage. I don't really see how that makes sense in this dysfunctional Congress, but like how this is supposed to play out. But it's and then below that there is a level of like AI is a scam. It's not real. It doesn't actually work. We've all been fooled. Like the real stuff is just not true.
Ed Zitron dominates this.
Yeah.
Have you had him on your podcast?
I had
not. My God, Bloomberg's having him on. I feel like, but there's such hunger in the media environment for an anti-AI voice.
Yeah, but a lot of those folks made predictions 2 or 3 years ago that really did not pan out.
Yeah, it's all that from my YouTube commenters.
Sorry, guys.
He's been saying it's gonna fail since 2024 at least.
But what it means to fail keeps changing.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't know. But I think that is a real strain of politics. But I think kind of more very online politics than real world politics. I just think that it's easy to overestimate when you are, if you were me, how much this is going to be a motivating issue for voters. Just seems a lot hard for me to believe.
Silicon Valley is always obsessed with going direct. Andreessen Horowitz has made a big push, and what they're now branding as new media. They put out an essay sort of articulating it.
This Torenberg?
Yeah, Eric Torenberg has come in. That's sort of their marketing effort. They have monitoring the situation, which is, sort of a TBPN knockoff. OpenAI is spending, apparently hundreds of millions of dollars on OpenAI, seemingly validating.
What is Newcomer's
Yeah, exactly. The comps, but Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, but like, what do you make of Silicon Valley's obsession with going direct? I guess. I mean, I think Andreessen put it pretty well in just saying, okay, it's a realization that old school marketing through the media meant you basically had to avoid saying anything stupid. Like they talk to somebody like you in the New York Times, and it's like, I'm important. They need to survive the interview. You're gonna, run some quote from them because they're important, and they hopefully didn't say anything that's like
Yeah, and
outside
I have
of the
total
norms.
control over how they appear.
Yeah, exactly. So they need to play it super safe. And now they build their own channels. They actually have an incentive to be interesting, which is something that, I think the media class would root for, right? That they have to be spicy to get people to pay attention. But, it's to their own ends and they're not sort of using us. I don't know. What do you make of the story they're telling?
Well, I mean, I think there's just like an obvious truth that you may have noticed. The media has splintered. There's this whole digital space now. The centralized platforms that control the broadcast towers and the printing presses no longer control. And like, it's sort of a, at this point, quite old and obvious technical story, which means that people can, just descriptively, you can speak to people directly. And so I think Andreessen has been incredible at marketing this idea about going direct, but every time they try to do it, it doesn't seem like they quite nailed it with that magazine they did Future, and now with this new MTS thing. I was on it for a while. It seemed fine, but like it doesn't. But and then the most successful media venture they've ever done though was Mark Andreessen set up during COVID a set of private group chats that were incredibly good at kind of manufacturing consent and shaping opinion on the center right and kind of rallying support for Trump in the end. And I think were really meaningful. And he and Shriram Krishnam and Torenberg did that. And it was a really successful media project. I think the thing that actually I find I'm truly an optimist here and in other spaces, but like, I think the thing that everyone is finding is that it turns out that asking hard confrontational questions is more interesting than asking like extremely boring sycophantic questions, and that telling like interesting true things like wears better than lying to people, and that there's like a pull even in these new media spaces, even if they were set up to be hyperpartisan. Like my favorite instance of this is that Pete Hegseth like threw all the normal reporters out of the Pentagon because he didn't like them saying the war was going badly. Or maybe it was a little before that, but he wouldn't have liked it. Brought in a bunch of like quite far right outlets, all of whom immediately started like who once they got their feet and figured out what where the bathrooms were, started asking why the war was going so badly. And like he was getting jammed up by Gateway Pundit, for instance. Like really, there's sort of and you saw this with Dwarkach's great podcast.
Amazing.
But also like he's become,
he was more capable and willing to stand up to Jensen.
Yeah, and I think like he's always been very, very well prepared and thoughtful, but I think like like he's getting better at it as we all do as he go, and that often means being a little tougher on his guests. And like I just think that's not because somebody went to journalism school. It's because that's more interesting.
Did you go to journalism school?
Did not.
Me neither. But we both came up through media and learned media norms. Like in some ways, media, there's just a set of ethics that controlled it, right? And in a good sense, right? I mean, it's like worry about conflicts, giving people the opportunity to respond to requests for I don't know. There are all these rules that I think every journalist who survived a couple of internships had to sort of live and breathe. Yeah. And I think part of what was a threat to Silicon Valley is that they superseded capitalism, right? That it was sort of norms that transcended sort of your sort of business objectives. Or do you see it that way? Or like, I sometimes talk about it as like a priesthood of journalism, in that like you're giving up sort of these sort of earthly concerns and you have these bigger moral rules that are guiding you. And I think, there's something good about that in journalism, but I think it almost required, a monopoly power. It's like to do non-economic things and to say we operate by this set code. You needed to not have the competition from people who are willing to do everything under the sun.
I guess I see it differently. Like first I see it, those as things that anyone would want, that are kind of like where the audience wants. They don't want you to be lying to them to have conflicts of interest. Like these are things that come out of your responsibility to the audience, not out of some priesthood. And out of the other things, I've always seen it, I stole this from my old boss, Jonah Peretti, but it's more like a trade. It's like you kind of work for the company you work for, but you also sort of work for the guild. And like if like the manager on site tells you to do something that isn't like in keeping with the guild standards, you're just gonna like put your tools in the bucket and go back. It's like some medieval guild.
That's how it used to be.
No, that's how it is now. Like that's the thing you're saying. It's not exactly capitalistic. It's like you sort of work for your employer. But I remember somebody asking Jonah like, well, can't you just get your journalists to do this? And he was like, no, you can't really get them to do things because like they sort of work for you, but they sort of work for the guild. And like if you ask them to do something that isn't in keeping with their weird self-regulating standards, like
Mark Andreessen clipped this. This is the most validating. This is like
like sort of like
a core thing.
sort of like
yeah.
sort of like lawyers, right? Like you can ask your lawyers at a certain point. You ask a lawyer to do something, and they're like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? But they're more regulated. Like journalists are self-regulating in ways that are good and bad. But journalists really will just kind of be like, no, I'm not going to do that, in a way that would be quite frustrating for people who manage them, including me.
Like, write about cloud companies more. There are sponsors or what?
Or just like whatever, where if you're a managed journalist, you've been a journalist. More like, hey, would you write this story? No, I think it's boring. They're just not normal employees.
And you think that's not going away?
Well, the thing about journalism is that the best reporters are usually the ones who are worst at following the rules. So it's messy. Probably true in a lot of professions.
I mean, to push back just on one of the points you made, which I largely agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think in Silicon Valley, people like these media personalities who are like in the mix. They've invested. I mean, all in. Obviously, most famously. Yeah. I mean, they're almost overselling how credible they are to get support from their readers. So their readers or their viewers want them to sort of be conflicted because it shows that they get it, that they're on the inside. So this idea that the audience, that you're serving your own business interests by not being conflicted, I don't know.
Right, that's just a spectrum of people who are like just business people and political leaders who are going direct, people who are becoming something more like journalists and commentators, while also, I mean, I think that's just the nature of this ecosystem now. And but I think within that, there's just obviously a role for independent journalism. People both would like to hear interesting opinions from people who might have conflicts and would be like to have people they trust tell them what's going on. Like, I don't think those things are really in conflict with each other.
But are we pursuing niche audiences for the rest of time? Like, do you think people are going to build new Reach All of America type publications, or it's just this race to
I think that's like fundamentally a technological story, and all this stuff. I just think all this stuff in media that we wring our hands about, and did the media get too left wing for too right wing for a bunch of social factors, or because
it's hysterical. If the business class on everything else would analyze a business based on their financial incentives, and then in the media they're like, it's all this cultural stuff.
And sometimes it is the cultural stuff, but I just think like when people say, well, trust in media collapsed because of the way Dan Rather covered George Bush and before, it's like, I just think there are these big structural factors, and again, just it's so obvious that I think people don't pause to think about it. But for this long period in the 20th century, you could only reach a mass audience if you had a license to some television spectrum or an enormous printing plant near a city and a huge fleet of trucks. And these are both like incredibly capital intensive, and most people can't have them. The spectrum is in fact, is scientific, is limited by physics. And so that produced this media for a period in the 20th century, which had not existed before and will not exist again, that's consolidated into a handful of centralized outlets. But that wasn't because there was people who wanted it culturally or didn't want it culturally. That was just technology. Like right now, there's only one way to get satellite internet in Malawi, and it's Starlink. But that's not a feature of the universe. That's just where we are. And I think that sort of was true of, there was only one, a couple ways to get news in Indianapolis. There was the ABC affiliate, the CBS affiliate, and the Indianapolis Star. And so like that creates a totally different environment than the one that America, the hyperpolarized, partisan, fragmented one that had preceded it, or the hyperpolarized, partisan, fragmented one now. That doesn't mean that there aren't more mass, particularly entertainment properties. There always have been. Marilyn Monroe is pretty famous, but the so on the margin with that, but I just think it doesn't necessarily mean niche, but that's just descriptive of a totally different technical universe.
Yeah,
and I think the anomaly was this the invention of television, really.
That we had technology that made it that we could distribute widely, but then it was still very controlled.
That just required enormous amounts of capital, and in fact, physical limits to. And particularly in the U.S., where you have these cities that are really far apart from each other. So in Britain, you never had these powerful regional newspapers. In the U.S., it's just hard to get the New York Times to Indiana.
I'm sure you've talked about it, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. But the collapse of BuzzFeed over time. Is it fundamentally just a Facebook story, or it's like it was riding the social wave? The social wave didn't sustain outside publications, and that was that, or is it a more complicated story?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
A book about it, Traffic.
Yeah.
Check it out. Wherever books are sold. From a kind of investment perspective, because actually one of the things I didn't write this book, but after the book came out, a question I got a lot was, particularly from investors, was like, why did anybody put $500 million?
And didn't Chris
Hundreds of
Hudson
millions.
do
He was on the board. He was Andreessen rep on the board. Like, what were people thinking? And there's actually a real answer to that that's interesting, which is that a lot of the early investors, in BuzzFeed and Vice in particular, had come out of and had their formative experiences in the cable area. These were the people who invested in MTV, in the companies that came Viacom, MTV, Comedy Central. And the core thing they'd learned was these entrepreneurs create a new technology, cable, new pipes, new wires. And then there's got to be content that's purpose-built for it. There's HBO, there's ESPN, there's CNN, there's comedy, there's all these amazing new brands. And if you're the cable operator, if you're Comcast, it's in your interest to shape a system in which content companies get paid, make great money, making great content for you, so that people will pay for your service. And so that was the analogy that they took into the social age, which was there are these new pipes now: Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, whatever, and there's going to be a new Viacom that's going to be building new content.
instead of oh my god, all these people are going to do it for free this semester.
Yeah, and they didn't bet on, and they I would say they did not only like, it wasn't that they weren't aware that user generated content was a thing, but I think their bet was that these companies would, in their competition with one another, wind up licensing professional content. And by the way, like, I don't think that was an insane bet. It's not how it played out, but I think if you look back at the declining Facebook Blue app now, and you said, like, what if they had tried to become Netflix? They'd be better if they were Netflix than what they are, right? So, like, I don't think UGC has always been, like, the right path. And in fact, YouTube now is really build a business that people can build businesses on top of.
Right, that's why I think Mr. Beast is a company.
Yeah, exactly. But that
But
was
maybe they underestimate
Yeah.
how much it would be totally different types of
individual
content.
creators. And I think YouTube in particular, I think that my sort of personal conspiracy theory is like, creator is a word that was invented by these platforms to make sure that content creators couldn't actually agglomerate into media companies or any other organization. Like they want to deal with Uber drivers, not with taxi fleets, and so that they have all the leverage, which is smart. But I think that, BuzzFeed and these other companies didn't predict for the future wrong, but I don't think it was like a crazy prediction.
But
It makes that's the nature of venture, right? Since
right. I mean, I think the consumers want human beings, right? I think part of what explains the creator phenomenon is just people now, whether it's sort of a mood or whether it's because they can get access to it, want vibrant, full people and not brands. Like they'd rather their brand mostly roll up to a human being.
People don't like institutions in this moment, but always have liked humans. I mean, television has always been, populated by humans. And now you're seeing like Kyla Scanlon went to CNN this week. Like there's a pendulum swing where a lot of the humans are being reconsolidated.
And all the, where you see the clips of like the TV shows that look like podcast studios where they steal the Mike Stylings of podcasts.
But the mic isn't even plugged in.
It's like, it needs to look like just a couple of guys, hanging out. So it's amazing the sort of aesthetic copycatting of it all. How do you personally one thing I am actively struggling with is always how much I want to sort of be a media executive versus be, the journalists, themselves. Like I was doing an exercise and it's sort of like, how much do I want to be the entrepreneur, the writer, the sort of media persona, like having a podcast, hosting events, and then now the fourth is, parent time. And it's sort of like, we wear these different hats. Like, how do you think about the hats you're wearing, what ones you like and want?
Yeah. I kind of like it all. Although I would say I would never be a good CEO. I'm not a good business executive. Like at BuzzFeed, there was a period where I was trying to be that.
Interesting.
And I just don't think I could. I don't know. I'm not strategic in that way. Like again, and my partner Justin Smith to me is like one of the reasons I wanted to work with him is when I was really failing at BuzzFeed, I was talking to people for like, what should I do? And he gave me And when I had lunch, he took me out to lunch. He gave me advice that I was like, "Oh my god, this is good advice," and I'm personally unable to execute on this. And so that's why I wanted to work with him. No, I mean, I'm a journalist. I'm an editor, and like I love a lot of the the stuff around it, and kind of trying to think of ways to do deals and shaping our events, which I really consider journalism. But the thing that I also love stories.
And you have an event to plug, but you haven't even plugged it.
I'm just, Sam, this is honestly why I'm a bad executive. Because if Justin was on here,
the first thing. I was like,
first thing he would have said.
It was somewhat competitive event. I mean, I think we're going to be friendly.
No, it's a friendly event. But after you leave Cerebral Valley, if you are lucky, we will invite you.
Oh my God! If you
no, we're having this event that actually, circling back to the thing we were talking about first, like this contact between government and technology is just so the central story now. It's also true that I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley don't want to like spend a week in Davos hobnobbing with politicians. And so our theory was, let's do an event like the SF standard called it Davos by the Bay, but called Silicon Valley in the World. We're taking over the iconic hotel in Silicon Valley and bringing in and a number of big tech leaders, Jensen Huang, Satya Nadella, Lisa Su, a long list of really key figures are on the advisory board or co-chairing it. And
it is this collision of tech.
And the idea is that we'll invite political figures and world leaders to the Valley to be because I think that they're more inclined to go to the Valley and really try to figure out what's going on there and meet these folks than a lot of these people are to go anywhere else. Like people are really busy. They don't necessarily always want to leave. And so I think I think we're trying to, and I think it will be the sort of premier conversation, at a really, really high level about that intersection of politics and technology.
No, you talked your book.
As you see, I get carried away by like yapping about the stories, and I forget to deliver.
How much do you see yourself as wanting to be, like in a media environment that demands faces and people wanting to be sort of one of the main characters of the publication versus sort of pull the newsroom?
I actually love scoops more than I love being right. In order, like often you get your best scoops because I'll say something I said on this podcast was idiotic, and somebody will call somebody will call you up and be like, "You got that totally wrong. Like here's the deal." And I said,
instead of just to be in the mix rather than right.
And I like love that feeling of like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like what did really happen? And I think like that probably, I don't know, at some point that gets in the way of you're having a personal brand where you're really sure and right all the time. But no, I love getting to that. I love helping other, honestly, the best part of being an editor is like helping reporters get scoops.
The best way to be right is to know, to have the scoop. I think often the best takes are like you're talking to the people who are informed, and so you write it like, I think
for sure
that's the direction, and you do that a lot, right?
Yes, I am reasonably informed, but I just would say that I think like my personal motivations, I love it from I want to know what's happening.
So you'd rather sort of push the issue to the level that somebody's calling you and saying,
like I care, I really do, and I think this is probably why I'm a better editor than I am talent, but like I would really rather get a scoop than advance my personal brand by being right. Like I'm addicted to.
You're addicted to the adrenaline of it?
I don't know. I'm just, maybe. And I think it's like and I love working with reporters who want to break news and want to figure out what's going on. Your friend, competitor, Reed Albergati, very much among them. I think it's.
Bali,
they call it news because you want something, you want to know what's going on.
Balaji, the network state owner, crypto guy.
One time media critic, maybe got bored of it. It gets boring.
He's sort of lonely. Like we had Taylor Lorenz. He was on with Taylor Lorenz on monitoring the situation. And he was almost like, nobody argues with us anymore. It's like, you block people, you like.
It's just got so boring. The tech media thing got so boring, I think.
But he seems to be advancing this. He is like an interesting thinker.
Yeah, for sure.
And is advancing a view, I think, that like, basically, we should only really care about people's online selves. That their sort of like offline selves should almost be out of bounds, and that we will live online and all that can be sort of scrutinized. And then, who cares, where your house is? I mean, him and a lot of people in Silicon Valley who some of them, are fearful for getting attacked, especially after the United CEO, really get mad when the media talks about where they live. And, obviously we saw it with Mamdani, the thing, outside Ken Griffin's house. I don't know. I'm making sort of 2 points. One is sort of like, do you see a world where like we change norms to sort of like, we're really obsessed with what happens online, but offline is almost like secret and pretend?
I mean, it's not my personal favorite kind of journalism to produce, right? Like gossip and
Or like what is somebody's house. But
did somebody break up with their celebrity girlfriend, or did they buy a house? Which, by the way, maybe they also did enjoy taking the New York Times photographer around and showing off how rich they have. Because really, what's the point of owning things like that if you don't show them off? They seem otherwise quite inconvenient to own. But that's not my kind of journalism. Should there be laws or norms that put TMZ and the Daily Mail out of business? Like, probably not in the United States. The First Amendment's gonna be hard.
I think there are a lot of things offline besides. I still think we live in a world where, for the most part, like one thing that keeps me up at night is just I feel like we hear so much about leaders where we really don't know much about them. You know, like I feel like if we lived in a small community, like if I lived in a small town and like the mayor's kids hated them, that would be very important to me. But we've created a culture on the national level where like Rudy Giuliani is like shouting at us on TV constantly, and we don't really care about their like their moral life in their like community within their family. And I think those things should actually matter a lot. So I am constantly of the view, one, that there's a lot of powerful decisions that are made in like rooms and not online, but also not people's houses and the address so some random person can go intimidate them, but like the facts about like how they live their lives really matter a lot.
Yeah, and I think you see that. I know a couple of reactions to that. One is that you certainly see that right now in this presidential administration more than any other. I have somebody I've known a long time who works in the administration was saying to me, very ideological conservative who was there to smash the administrative state in their view. And part of that, and there's a whole Claremont Institute philosophy, you have to elect a Caesar who's going to come and smash everything, because who else can smash it but a Caesar? But this person said to me, well, we didn't really consider that once you get the Caesar in, they may have their own ideas, right? Like they may not want to smash things. They may just want to do other stuff and crypto, and that they felt like they're working for like that fundamentally is a personalist government. And so I'm not sure the character of president has ever mattered more, because Trump is so unconstrained by ideology and ideas and patterns and norms. The other thing, the story that what you just said made me think of, though, was that sort of, to me, like invasive and awful story that everybody laughed about Kristi Noem's husband's like unusual sexual preferences. And I don't know if you saw, there was a Times reporter who was in the town that week, chasing the same story when the Mail broke it, and then talked to people in the town, and they were all like, "Oh, he's a nice guy. Like, kind of, who cares? Like, leave this poor guy alone. He's hard enough for."
But in some ways, it was still sort of dehumanized. Yeah,
but like that is but what you said, like it is like you just get these sort of two-dimensional, totally politicized views of people. That is obviously product.
And people love. I mean, not to get so mad up, but I had Aaron D'Souza, who's a Teal Acolyte, the guy who helped bring down Gawker on my podcast, and I disagree with him on.
He helped bring down Gawker on your podcast?
No, I had him on my podcast. He was one of the guys who know.
I know his role in the Gawker.
Yeah. No, not. I was unrelated and critical. But he holds up podcasting as this, medium with no artifice. It's like, oh, you're getting the real person. And like, we were talking before the show, I don't think our conversation is so different than how we're talking before the show. It is somewhat different. And, you're not getting like, if we were having drink, I don't know, like this is the most meta me question in the world, but like, do you see podcasting as like an authentic medium that is delivering an answer to this problem of like, we need to stare into their soul?
Oh, okay. Like good news. Yes. Bad news. That's the problem. It's like blogging. It's like an amateur medium that is now professionalizing. Most people do not actually want like whatever. We're going to talk for an hour. 20 minutes will be the most interesting 20 minutes of that. 20 minutes will be the middle, and 20 minutes will be the most boring. You're going to put the whole thing online. But as this medium professionalizes and becomes something more like television, your producers can be like, hey, we're going to cut the boring part and only use the interesting part. It's going to be a 20-minute
No, that's a great answer. It's just like every new medium, it feels authentic and real. And then
remember blogging, it's like real, but it's also shaggy and unprofessional, and parts of it are good and parts of it are bad. And as it moves up this production ladder and in a very, very intense, completely competitive environment, suddenly, and there is, there will remain an ability to reach smaller audience and higher value, like obviously because it is different. But to me, one of the most telling things about this moment is that if you look at the list of top podcasters 5 years ago, it was a bunch of like our weirdo podcast friends. If you look at the list of top podcasters now, it is almost without exception, not entirely. the cable news lineup of the 20.
Well, that Amy Poehler, isn't she like one
Yeah,
of the
right. And these are, and unbelievable, basically like the most gifted broadcasters in the world. Like to me, Piers Morgan, like whatever you think of Piers Morgan, is just an unbelievably like gifted interviewer. Like raw, he's just his whatever you think of what he says and what he thinks, he has like this technical gift. And so no wonder his show is popular. And why wasn't he doing it on the internet before? Because he was getting paid $50 million a year to do it on TV. Now he's getting paid something like that to do it on the internet, so he does it on the internet. And I think there's this professionalization of these media that always happens. They start as amateur and as games, and you can't make any money out of it. But it's really fun. It's really human and real, and then it professionalizes. And I think that in broadcasting to me is, I think in 5 years, if you say you have a podcast, it will be like saying you had a blog. If I said to you now that I have a blog,
either it is bridged to becoming a show,
yeah,
or just like silly.
Well, or it's like cute. Like if I have a blog, right? And if I told you, oh, I have a blog, it would be like what would my blog be about?
Well, I'd be like, you can, get all these email addresses with a newsletter. You need to do it as a newsletter. But
yeah.
my last question, I thought that was a really great take. AI as it sort of speaks to media consumption. Like, I don't know. And there's the GEO, like generative engine optimization. I don't even know what the acronym stands for, but it's the new version of SEO. Like, one narrative, maybe Pat is like, oh, it's going to be great for media because you need to get a story, especially in Semafor with no paywall, because that's what's going to define what's going to be behind the model. But I mean, do you think, people are going to just read the news in ChatGPT and therefore not come to Semafor? Like, what's your sense of how the models are going to impact news?
I mean, I think, because we started Semafor recently and sort of in this era, we think about it a lot. And I think a lot, it'll obviously swallow commodity news, the sort of rewrite of the press release very, very fast. So you have to think about what is it not going to do? It's not going to break original news. And it doesn't give you that kind of human connection. And in some sense, everything in the spectrum between those is very vulnerable. So, but I think that those have always been the most valuable parts of journalism and the most rewarding for journalists, which is to gather the information and then to really, like, in a way that you're putting your personal credibility on the line. Even though at Semafor I think we do try really hard to have a humility about our own perspective. Like, here's my view, but here's somebody who disagrees with me. And that's how we structure our stories. But I think we're really interested in having great talented journalists speaking in their own voices, and then also in breaking news a lot. I think those are the things that I think, feel defensible to AI. And then we use these tools all the time for everything in between.
One thing I feel like tech people don't get about news is that they often see things as like a big data problem. And so it's like, oh, you want like the best White House summary, you just like take all the beat, all the coverage and just sort of like bundle it all together. But I think like savvy news consumers often say, well, right now it's Maggie Haberman, it's not right now, she's writing a book, but like, whatever reporter of the moment on the beat, they're getting it, and the scoops are assigned, they're talking to the real execs. If you're super savvy, you're like, this person really represents this camp and this person represents this camp.
Yeah.
And like, do you think that do you agree that there is that sort of singular nature where people think of media as like so large, but there's very small set? And then do you think those really great takes then somehow get licensed to the models, or the models miss them, or what happens there?
And I think that's not something people would be under the models for anytime soon. But I agree with you that times a lot of great reporters, but I will read Maggie's story immediately. And if it's whoever if I was at the Times and somehow I got stuck covering the White House on a Saturday because nobody else could do it, well, he shouldn't read my story. Like, I don't know more than anybody else. You should read Maggie's story. And they're both in the New York Times, but they're really totally different kinds of thing. And so I think it, again, pushes toward this, you want to hear from an individual person. The Times, interestingly, like, I think we at Semafor have really thought a ton about building around these big individual voices. And I think for startups, and it's true of you too, it's a big advantage to have started from scratch in this moment, being able to build around voices. I think the Times, despite having 1,700 journalists and the internal politics is incredibly complicated, actually have embraced this a lot more than I would have expected.
I love Jamel Bouie's TikTok. Like, Ezra Klein's obviously doing a really good job. They just lost.
So it's that is the problem for media companies, though. Is there's always a pull to become Eric Newcomer.
Ben Smith, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's our episode. This is the Newcomer Podcast, where we chop it up on all things Silicon Valley. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. Go read the Newcomer Substack if you want to get really in the weeds and understand the real business of venture capital and startups at newcomer.co. If you still yearn for podcasts, I've got the Cerebral Valley Show with Max Child and James Wilsterman. Otherwise, probably see you in about a week. Thanks for all your support. That's our show.